Roll call.
Commissioner Jackson,
Here.
Commissioner Williams, Commissioner Willis, Vice Mayor Hutchison, and Mayor Capizzi.
Here. All right. Public comments that are not on the agenda. We've got Klaus Peter Finkel.
Klaus Peter Finke, 190 Cocoa Beach, Seminole Lane, Cocoa Beach. The agenda today says you're going to set a millage rate, and I've spoken up to a couple of times already over the years. The Commission seems to set a millage rate, a maximum achievable millage rate, which is a number that's very arbitrary, but every year it seems to be that the Commission ties their hands behind their back. So I'll urge you once again, set the millage rate at the highest you can do by law, let the process work itself out, and then see what millage rate comes out. Secondly, in the last workshop, two of the Commission members made it very clear that they had their minds made up about there would be no tax increases. This budget process is designed bottoms up, so your department heads will tell you what they would like to have, and you're very welcome to go and talk to them and do cuts and what have you. But the millage rate that you should agree on is something that falls out of the process. You should not go into the process with your minds made up what the millage rate is going to be. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else about items that are not on the agenda? Go ahead.
Rick Anderson, 1800 Minuteman Causeway. I just have kind of a procedural question here. This has been advertised as a special meeting, and it's being called a workshop. And it's my understanding that if this is a legal meeting, that the results are binding, whereas the results of a workshop are not binding. So I'm just wondering what status, when you guys set a millage rate tonight, is it a legally binding one, or is this a workshop and it's advisory?
Thank you, Rick. Could you elaborate on any of that for us?
Okay, I can. Go ahead. Yeah. Patricia Draycott, CFO. So tonight, we're going to do the budget workshop, and following the budget workshop, we'll be setting the proposed or maximum millage. It doesn't need to be legally advertised. It's not part of that process. The part that gets advertised is the second public hearing, which is when they adopt the final budget, and that'll happen September 19th. Part of the meeting tonight will be to set those two dates, the first public hearing, which is the tentative millage rate and the proposed budget, and then the second public hearing is when they set the final millage with the final adopted budget. So tonight, what we're doing is a budget workshop, just going over numbers, doing some feedback, showing some changes in what they looked at the last time we met on this, and just to give a little more information to the commissioners so that when they're setting the proposed or maximum millage, that they will have a full amount of knowledge and information going into it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other public comments about items that are not on the agenda? Yeah, come ahead. Come speak up here, please, and name and address.
Margaret Schneider, 191 Seminole Lane, Cocoa Beach. I want to speak about sidewalks, but I'm wondering if indirectly what I'm going to say doesn't have to do with the budget. So it's kind of like a rock and a hard place here.
Sidewalks are part of the budget.
Pardon me?
Sidewalks are part of the budget.
So I should wait till the end. I have no problem doing that.
I mean, maybe you'll get a better idea how we feel about sidewalks, so
Okay.
I think it'd be better.
All right, no problem, thanks.
And I think, Sandra, did you raise your hand? And just state name and address.
Sandra Sullivan from South Patrick Shores. So I wanted to talk about lifeguards and some research I've been doing. First of all, I was at a meeting the other day, Patriots meeting, and State Representative Randy Fine was there, and he stated that the use by the county of the TDT tax for lifeguards is not a legal use, and this will end up inevitably in the courts. So at a recent TDC meeting, they moved nearly $1 million from their cultural grants fund to marketing. So that's an issue. And so my recommendation, and because I advocate on a lot of issues, so when I look at how the state awards funding for our beaches, for our sand renourishment, they have a calculation based on how many feet you have on a beach, and then they have a calculation based on how many parking spaces. If you have more than 100 parking spaces, you get a larger amount of money. And the reason they do that is they consider them tourism beaches, because they recognize for the state that it brings in a return on investment. For every dollar that they spend, they get a return on that investment. So my recommendation in looking at the state statute for the TDT is to go to the state representative. We're going to have a legislative session coming up, and it's around this time in advance that they start writing bills. And I think it's a very astute point to say, when you have tourism beaches, it is a tourism expense, you have public safety expenses that are associated with that. It is a fair and reasonable expectation for public safety. And this equates directly to the return on investment for our local governments and for the state. And it is a very solid argument that say, in the interest of public safety, the TDT language should be changed. And there is language in the TDT language for the use of that tax for public service, for public safety, for lifeguards and ambulance and police, but it's only if the jurisdiction is less than 275,000 people. So I'd like to leave this with you, Mayor, if that's okay, and just suggest that with some tweak of the state statute, I think we could get a win-win solution for everybody in the interest of public safety. Should I?
Thank you,
approach
Senator. Just leave it with the clerk right there, and I'll grab it.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Yes.
Janice Scott, Cocoa Beach. I serve on the Brevard County Land and Parks Committee, and we meet 4 times a year through the reorganization of suggested by Commissioner Tabaya. And we suggested at our last meeting last week that we sent a recommendation to the County Commission that they lobby to have the TDC tax expenditures, how they can spend the money, which is now illegal, and according to Representative Fine, to spend that on lifeguards. And it only requires a tweak in the statute where they say the TDT funds can be used for structures at the beach and so on and so forth. All they have to do, according to a couple of other representative offices that I spoke with, is insert the words life safety, personnel, or some sort of language. So what I'm hoping is that you all will work on that, submit some language that the city attorney can give to our lobbyists, because this is going to happen really fast. We have an election coming up in November. The representatives that are turned out or aren't running again, we get a whole new cadre of representatives, and it's got to hit the ground fast to be on the agenda in January and at the state legislature. And just to remind you that Commissioner Tabaya requested that Cocoa Beach pay $731,231 for lifeguards because, we have these parking fees, and he felt the parking fee should pay for it. So I look forward to hearing from you about the status of that situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Is that it for public comment? All right. Staff reports and announcements.
Nothing this evening.
Okay. New business.
evening. So Patricia Draycott, CFO. Having had some feedback from commissioners from the last meeting until this one, I've made some revisions to the report that you have in front of you from the last time we met. This slide shows you the reserve requirements by fund, and I've actually separated out the total cost of the debt service on the annual basis from other reserve requirements for the general fund, well, for all of the funds. And then in the general fund, there's the 19% that the city commission passed for assigned emergency disaster, and that's just a little over 6.7 million. And then there's the unassigned reserve minimum of 2%. And what that is just a reserve requirement, but for not a specific purpose such as the 19%. So the total minimum reserve requirement is just about $8.6 million for the general fund. In the CRA fund, the utilities fund, and the stormwater fund, the debt service requirement is, or the reserve requirement is the debt service, and then just best practice, not by commission requirement, but just best practice is to have a minimum of 2 months costs in your reserve your reserve balance, and that's what you'll see for that total minimum reserve requirement. This is looking at your sources of funds. There's the major change between the last time and this time is under the other receipts. Oh, this is what you saw last time, my mistake. This is what we looked at last time with the revenues and the expenditures, which would have ended up with a reserve balance of 3.4 million. And that would not meet the needs that we have. So some of the things that initially that I have done is I pulled out the capital facilities for the fire station design, planning and construction, for the marina study and design, and just a notation that that 445 represents study and design only, because without completion of that, we don't have full cost of construction. And then adding in a city hall parking garage. And that's the estimated full cost, but there's a possibility that if the commission was to decide to go forward with this project, that it could be a private-public partnership. So some of that cost could be financed not through debt or city costs, but through the private contributions to that construction. But by taking those, having those as being debt financed, it's going to increase the revenues for that year. And so it kind of has an offset to that expenditure, which reduces the amount of ad valorem that would be needed in the year of construction. Granted, after you get the debt financing, the year following that, there would be, the debt would go up. Yep. So then you'd have debt payments, but those debt payments would be over a 20-year period. And even for a cost like that, it would be probably less than 1.5 million on an annual basis. Yes, sir.
So you say you've taken these out, these 3 items out?
When you look at this,
I'm just, it was
it's not really taking it out. It's taking it out of how do you pay for it? Do you pay for it by using ad valorem taxes? In other words, are you paying for it by cash? And if you're paying for it by cash, you end up with that picture of 3.4 million in reserves.
It's still in this budget, is what you're at.
Yeah.
So out of those 3 items, City Hall parking garage, I'm willing to kill. Fire station planning, design, and construction, I think, for the north fire station, right?
Yep.
I think it needs to stay. We can have a discussion with the mayor about the marina study and design. We haven't even gotten any results from the survey that was performed a couple of months ago, or at least a month and a half ago. And the word on the street is that, the majority of the people, don't want to spend $445,000 on the design of a marina. That obviously, if you're paying that much for the design, you can almost multiply that by 4 for any potential construction. So as far as the marina goes, we've already spent $75,000. I've asked the city manager, and we've said at this commission that out of that $75,000 study portion, that we want a feedback from the Brevard County Manatee Management Plan that says up or down, is this possible or not possible? And the Brevard, for anybody who doesn't know, the Brevard County Management Protection Plan was forced into place by the Manatee Club, so that they didn't have to, sue and get involved in every little thing that went on in Brevard County that could affect manatees. So if the first $75,000 doesn't pass the litmus test for the Brevard County Manatee Protection Plan, then I don't want to spend the other $75,000, and I think we should defer this $45,000 for now, because I just don't think that it's prudent when that money's needed elsewhere. And if we get back stellar results from the Brevard County Manatee Management Committee and St. John's and the Corps of Engineers and every other regulatory group, and we get no poke-ups from the Manatee Club, then maybe we'll spend the other $75,000, which is already plotted for next year. Is that correct?
It is in there currently,
All
yes.
right, so
What,
out of these 3 items, I'm willing to keep number 1. That's my opinion.
She explained to me what we could have done if we did the same thing with the fire station 50, a parking garage, and City Hall, and what difference would have made now instead of putting the cash towards the City Hall. Can you kind of summarize that?
So what this does is, if the commission chooses to use debt financing, whether you move forward with the final budget or you don't, it's not going to have a impact in fiscal year 25 on the reserve balance, because you either fund it with debt proceeds or you don't go forward, and then you don't have the revenue coming in, you don't have the cost going out. So it doesn't really affect that reserve balance. So what happened with the City Hall construction is that most of that project has been paid for by using reserves, cash balance. So it's been taking cash out of investments, and it's reduced that reserve balance that's going to come forward. So when you look at your funds that are flowing forward into the fiscal year 25 budget, they're reduced by that full amount of construction that was not financed by debt. So the amount that was financed by debt is going to be $3.9 million, and that's coming to the commission on Thursday for finalization of that. But the remainder of that has just come out of your cash or out of your reserve balance. And so it's depleting those funds that have come forward. When you spend a large amount like that, it's always going to bring those reserve balances down, and it means you have less available then for future budgets. As opposed to if you say all of these large projects will be financed by debt financing, what it does is it spreads that cost out over a 20-year period, giving you more available for current year budgets.
But it's still money that's got to be spent.
It's still money that's going to be spent. It's just a matter of, do you spend it all in 1 year, or do you spend it over 20 years?
And you don't pull it out of the reserves.
And you don't pull it out of the reserves. You can budget. It's easier to budget for $1.5 million than it is to budget for 13 million.
So why don't we, go ahead.
But now we're in that situation now because that's what we did. So now we got to figure out what we're going to do.
So 1 and 2 are in the budget, and there's the offsetting debt revenue, correct?
Yeah,
The
so.
third one is not in the budget.
The 7.8 wasn't in what you saw
Right.
last time we met. So,
So what she's saying is the offsetting revenue coming from debt for items 1 and 2, if those get taken out, it's going to be a net zero change because the revenue is going to go away because they're not debt financed.
either you budget for the revenue and you budget for the project, or the commission at any point before they finalize it, say, we're not moving forward in '25 with this, and both the costs come out and the revenue from the debt proceeds. So those changes, those decisions won't have an overall impact on your final budget number. So when you look at this screen, it's the same thing that we saw on the first one, except now when you look at the miscellaneous, you've got 15 million versus here you had 1.9. And that change is adding in those debt proceeds. And then when you still see here, the capital hasn't really changed because I didn't pull those out. The only change to the capital was adding in the cost of the parking garage as a potential project. I'm not saying that you're going to choose to move forward, but it's just so you can see what that impact would be. And with just that change, just moving those out, and not moving them out, but showing those as being financed through debt, you can see the impact on the fiscal year '25 projected reserve balances.
So I'm okay. I mean, I understand a lot of people don't understand the whole reason behind the marina. Obviously, it's to create more revenue to keep taxes down. I understand a lot of people don't understand that. If you guys want to pull that 445,000, which might not even ever get spent because we don't know if it's even feasible, that's fine with me. But we should continue with our feasibility study to see what it's going to say. We've already put the money in. Let that feasibility study run its course. And then if it's not feasible, no harm, no foul, but pull the 450, I don't care, but let the feasibility study remain so that we know whether it's feasible or not.
Well, I don't even think it's pull, I think it's just defer it.
Well, no.
2 things.
Or
I think
defer it.
Take it out for now.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Look,
Take it out for now. We'll get the results of the first $75,000 we spent. We'll hash that over.
We
and we'll
budgeted
decide if we're gonna
150 for it.
Spend the other $75,000 that was proposed. And then if everything comes up roses, then we'll consider what it's gonna cost to do design and a build.
as I said before, I absolutely will not vote for this marina unless it is 100% feasible, without a doubt. If it's a little feasible and it's just teeter-tottering, I will not vote for this. The only reason why I'll vote for this, if it is absolutely profitable and it makes sense. So just so everybody knows, I'm not hardcore on this. I don't need this marina. I'm thinking of ways outside of the box for us to keep our taxes down. So if you guys want to wait on that 450, I'm willing to, but we need to find out what this feasibility study says, because at this point, nobody knows what it says.
So, Mayor, I appreciate your comments. I appreciate your comments. That's the right thing to say. But, going back to when you were a kid, we did studies and plans and all this for a Taj Mahal, police department, fire department, city hall. It was only $12.5 million back in 2004. But the money we spent to put that plan on the shelf was pretty, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we never thought, well, are we going to be able to pay for it? And so once we got the plan and all that, we look and, we can't pay for it. So, that's why I don't really, we'll get the feasibility studies and all that, and if it looks feasible and all the regulatory committees and the manatee people don't pop their head up, then we decide, and I believe, yes, there is a return on investment. Would it be realized in the next, would it pay for itself in the next 10 years or 15 years? maybe 20 years, maybe. But, you know, I mean, we already know that there's a bunch of boats that are going to be displaced from the port. This is a safe place for a lot of boats that don't have more than a 5-foot draft. It'd have to be run properly, you'd have to have pump out, you can't have people living on boats and dumping their crap in the river as an environmental concern. You know, there's the expenses for personnel that are monitoring and running the marina are gonna just always.
That'll all come out in the feasibility study. There's no sense in picking it apart here when
No, I'm
nobody
not trying
knows
to
what's
be
going
wrong.
on.
I'm just saying that we've spent lots of money over the years for studies and plans that we never had the money to implement, and they all gathered dust on the shelf. So,
The studies and plans and everything you're talking about, there's a difference between investment opportunities and just building stuff that you have to have.
$445,000 is for the design, and I'm not willing to plan money in the future.
I said that's fine.
Okay.
Let's get the feasibility study done. That's all I care about.
Okay.
And we'll let the study decide. If the study says it's garbage, I'm done. I don't care. I don't want my name attached to something that doesn't work.
Patricia, do you need a red pen?
Okay.
And take out the parking garage while you're at it.
No, let's not take out the parking. That develops a lot of revenue, and she doesn't have to, you don't have to spend it, it's just there.
So let me just chime in on that. I think parking garages are absolutely profitable. I think the one that we have is profitable. It makes sense. The only problem is, I don't think that parking garage at this time will be profitable because we don't have the need yet. In 5 years, we might, but I don't want to put money out for something that's going to take 5 years to start.
Why do you say 5 years? They're building all around us. You've got most building this thing, everything's getting built around us.
I think
We are
if you put it-
saturated with parking spaces that we need to provide new businesses growth. I mean, we could at least do a study or whatever, have Wayne looking into it. We don't have to spend $7.8 million next year, but
I think Shepherd Park would be profitable for a parking garage, and it's
they already
less
have 2 parking
intrusive.
garages there and a parking lot that they just built.
But in my
It's not ours
opinion,
either.
I understand the parking garage, but I feel like it will take years before it's actually necessary. I go to a lot of events downtown, and I know you do too. I know you understand. I rarely see that parking garage full. So a second
I see
parking
it all the
garage.
time because I have to drive around
I
and
know,
use it.
I know.
All the time. All the time.
I'm just trying to let you understand why I'm kind of not on board at this point for the parking garage. I think it will be profitable in 5 years. I think at this point, we're not there yet. But I am, and I know that a lot of the residents don't want to see another parking garage downtown.
So let me ask a question of our city attorney and our city clerk. This is a decisional meeting, correct? We can make decisions at this meeting, is that correct?
Yes, you can, but you're not going to be, you can take a consensus. You're not going to be voting on something that is going to be chiseled in stone.
Well, then, can I make a motion to get a vote by consensus? Or do
Sure.
I have to do head nods?
No, you can do that. You can do that.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion by consensus that we should at least move the parking garage at least 1 year to the right. We'll deal with it in the budget next year. And I'm looking for a second.
Got a motion and a second. Any comment?
I disagree.
Okay. You got anything you want to say about it?
Yeah, and I'm hearing both sides, and I think revenue generators are great. I think right now we're in a season where construction is at an all-time high in terms of cost. With projections that construction costs, both in labor and materials, will be going down, I think there's a lot of logic in deferring for a year, but not because I think there's an illogic to significant revenue generators, and I have seen the parking garage consistently full along with you, just about every time I've tried to park in there. So I think it's doing a good thing. So, but my thought is primarily on the ultra premium on the cost of construction and labor. I think for that reason alone, deferring costs is a good thing. That's where I'm at.
You got my motion?
Well,
Karen?
Yes.
all right, and then I'd like to get some public comment on this, if anybody wants to comment on that.
I would like to comment. Could y'all give us a break on capital improvement? Just for a minute?
Just state your name and address and your concern.
Leonard Beckett, 1503 Minuteman Causeway, Cocoa Beach. I am absolutely appalled at the amount of money that you people have spent in the last 5 years. It's insane. You can't afford to pay your current bills, you can't afford to put lifeguards on a beach, and you're talking about spending $10, $12 million every other year on buildings. We got a brand-new fire station that was supposed to be built to hurricane standard to sustain a Category 4 or 5, and we get one tropical storm, and the whole facade falls off of it. We've got a parking garage over here that doesn't look anything like what you told us it was going to look like, because the contractor cheaped out, or somebody failed in their job in babysitting a contractor. We've got a city hall that started out to be a $6 million project and ends up being a $20 million project because somebody wasn't wise enough to realize that you're 200 feet from the beach and a storm surge of 5 feet was going to take City Hall out until the west coast gets decimated. And then you decide, oh, maybe we need to spend another few $100,000 to redesign a building and make it twice or 3 times as expensive. We're paying more for that building than every other city in the county has paid for their city hall. And then you've got this irresponsible idea, cockamamie idea about a marina. And let me just tell you something. I lived on board on a 47-foot yacht for 23 years in several marinas in this county. That marina will never make a profit. There is not enough space to make it an operable, profitable marina. You need a work yard, you need a pump out, you need fuel stations. I don't understand the concept. What is wrong with the idea that our elected officials who's supposed to be watching the purse strings actually fulfill their fiduciary duty? When your citizens are representing a net loss of income of 30% over the last 2 years, and you continue to want to increase your budget by substantial amounts, and then trying to figure out how you can avoid from paying for it immediately. If I can't pay my bills at my house, I can't just say, oh, well, I'll just let it go for 20 years and we'll pay, $10 every month for 20 years. That's not a responsible option, ever. If you can't afford it, you shouldn't build it. Now, I had a whole different thing set up here that I was going to talk about. I've got a speech sheet in. And I'd love for this to go in the record, what I've prepared to talk about later on. But listening to this conversation is just foolishness.
Thank you, sir. You can submit your document to the city clerk if you want to put it in the record. And actually, I'd like to reference our Patricia on a couple things. I do appreciate your comments, and I do sympathize with you, being a resident in this town as well. There was a whole lot of inaccuracies in a lot of what you said, so I'm going to address Patricia with a certain amount of comments. Patricia, 2 years ago, when we first took office, were we not just right at around 44 million, just under 43 million something in debt?
Yes.
Last year, did we not pay the debt down to about $40 million?
Yes.
This year, did we not pay the debt down to about $36 million.
Yes.
This commission, out of any commission, is dedicated to paying down debt and being responsible with your money. You don't see what happens behind the scenes, but we fight, and we fight hard for you. We think of ways to save money or to make money here and there to offset taxes. You know, the City Hall project was not $20 million. It was $13 million, I believe.
11.5.
$11.5 million, not 20, so half of what you thought it cost. Like I said, a lot of inaccuracies. I understand your outrage. We are fighting hard to bring this money down. Believe me. That's why we're arguing about this money up here, about what we're going to pay for either a marina or parking garage or anything. We're on your side, and I appreciate your comment and your concern, and it didn't go unnoticed, so thank you. Anybody else? Yes?
If I could just
Yeah.
clarify one thing. We, as a government agency, nothing that we do is designed or intended to ever make a profit. What happens is if we have a revenue source that can subsidize other areas, it means that we have funds available for projects or other costs, which would then allow the commission to perhaps reduce the cost of the ad valorem or the property taxes that are needed. So it's a balancing thing. So when you have a program like the parking program, where the commission, when they set that in place, it was to offset some of the costs of public safety for the police and fire, because there's a large cost for our public safety to be out there to protect the citizens. We have a lot of tourists, and that makes a very heavy burden on our public safety. So that's a revenue that comes in that now is covering some of those costs that now are not requiring taxpayer dollars to cover those costs and keep you guys safe while our police and our fire are out there on the road and on the beaches and taking care of you. So it's not that we're making a profit, but it's a way or a method that the commission is looking at. How do we generate revenues from other ways, other sources than just taxpayers' dollars? The issue is that you have to go out, you don't have to go out, but if you go out for debt financing, it just smooths where that cost comes in, and it allows for a project such as the marina, if it's feasible, or the parking garage, it allows the revenues generated to support that cost of the debt, and thereby doesn't place the burden on the taxpayer. And so that's kind of where I believe the commission is looking at, is options to help mitigate that burden to the taxpayer and still provide services to the people that live here.
Thank you, Patricia. One more thing. The 9 years prior that for this, the majority of this commission getting elected, isn't it fair to say that we did raise our debt every year for 9 years consecutively?
Well, I mean, if you look, I don't know off the top of my head, but a lot of that debt that's being referenced, the total debt, more than half of it is through state revolving fund loans, which are an extremely low rate of interest. It's where we borrow from the state of Florida, and it goes to stormwater improvements and upgrades at the utility treatment plant. The actual debt in the general fund is not that significant. We have one of the lowest general fund debts.
Thank you. I'm just,
And when we built the fire station, I think we got our loan for 1.8%.
Yeah.
And when we built the parking garage, it was in that same range,
Yeah.
maybe a little over 2%. So those were good, debt expenses at the time.
another thing about taking debt is, and I'm not for debt at all, by the way, and any way we can, I avoid us, and me and Patricia argue about this all the time. But another good thing is, if we're getting 1.5%, or I think you're saying just under 4% for this
For the
City Hall.
City Hall, it's
The money in our funds accrue more. They're accrue 5 or 6%. We're actually making money by having debt rather than using the cash. So sometimes you do take debt to offset because the interest rate, it makes it better. That's the only way that I'm willing to make, choose debt is if I know I'm going to make money off of it.
I want to say, that's my whole belief and why I brought this up too. I know plenty of people, rich people, who have money to buy expensive houses, but they can pay cash if they want to, but they choose to finance because keeping the money in the bank makes them more money keeping it in the bank. And that's what I'm applying here, and that's what all governments do. City, federal, that's how they, if we didn't, and being part of that commission that raised the debt, as you guys were saying, we needed those buildings. Our city hall, our police station was a horrible mess. We had massive floods in it, a huge pipe burst, like the year before I was elected. We severely needed a parking garage because people would drive around. We couldn't have successful businesses because we had no parking. All those things were needed and necessary, and we couldn't do it without financing. So, and I see proof that it has significantly improved our situation downtown. So it wasn't we were irresponsible, it was things we really needed, and that's how we accomplished it. And it was smartly appropriating funds for the debt with the advice of our CFOs to do that, not just piling on debt irresponsibly. It was very calculated and planned.
Thank you.
So the debt is a cash flow technique. I mean, more important is the millage rate. That's
Yeah.
the budget we're voting on. So I completely agree with him.
Yeah.
We've got to be top down. We've got to be diligent.
I absolutely agree too.
The debt is a tool to manage the cash flow.
Right.
More importantly is the millage rate.
Yes.
And I absolutely am going to stick to it. Top down. We can't open the budget up just because, oops, we did a bottoms up roll up and we exceeded it. So
The way I see it is, we need to work with what we have, and if we have to be responsible with the taxpayers' money. This isn't our fund to use for whatever we want. So I agree. I still want to keep, but we still got to go through all this. So there were some public comments that I want to take since this spurred some things. So go ahead. Yes.
John Lowe's, 444 Dempsey Drive, Cocoa Beach. I think the primary problem from the highest level here is that the budget that's on the table right now, the draft budget, it requires something like $10 million approximately draw down in the reserves. Am I correct on that? It's showing a significant drawdown in the reserves, and that's what we as a commission, we as a city, we don't want to do that. So that's the rub. So if I refer back to the previous slide, there were 3 projects up there. There was the firehouse, the marina, and the parking garage. And it gives the impression that we're trying to do all 3 of those items in this fiscal budget that we're going to set in the next few months. We're trying to do those 3 items in the next fiscal budget. Now, I understand the marina is only on the study part, it's not the construction. But the firehouse at $5 million, that's like the all-in cost. The parking garage, 7.8, that just came up at the last commission meeting, but that's like the all-in cost. The marina is going to go over years, but it gives the impression that we're trying to do that in the next fiscal year. It's not physically possible to do that in the next fiscal year, even if we wanted to do it. It's not possible. I think for me, it would make more sense if it showed that those 3 items, whether they survive on their merits or not, maybe they don't survive on their merits, but if they survive on their merits, that gets spread over like 5 years or something, or 3 years, or pick some, it's calendarized, it's not in the next fiscal budget, and it gives the illusion that that's in the next fiscal budget. We're going to draw the reserves down to pay for all of that, but we're not really going to do that because you can't do that in 1 year. In the fiscal year we're in, we're doing the preponderance of the city hall. But the city hall is going to go into the next fiscal budget. So all those things will do the same thing. They'll start in 1 fiscal budget and they'll probably go for 2 more fiscal budgets. It could probably hit 3 budgets. And I think if it was shown that way, it would feel better. You know, the other thing is that, you know, if you take the capital projects that are in this draft in their entirety, there's a lot of capital projects in here. I doubt we have the staff or the professional services or the engineering resources to actually implement this stuff. So it's in there, it looks like we're running a deficit and we have to draw the reserves down, but I don't even think we could do it if we wanted to. And that's more than just the 3 on that page. That's the 10 or 15 page capital budget list for this year that's causing some of this problem. And each of those projects has to survive on their own merit, but you can't do it in the same fiscal year anyway.
Thank you, John.
Mr. Lowe's?
Yes, sir?
So, and Patricia can correct me, but we have to project out our budget, or she does, for, 10 years plus, okay? So with those out-year projects, on the horizon and in the budget, she's got that bottom line that shows the up and down in the reserve, okay? So, it's just kind of you can't just forget them and then throw them back in without really messing up the reserve balance in an out year.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I don't have it in front of me, so I'm going to talk on the top of my head. The 5-year capital budget, the 5-year look-ahead showed an enormous number in the next fiscal budget, a phenomenally, unbelievably large number. And then in 26, 27, 28, 29, the number comes way down. So just looking at that, I'm going to spend this much this year, and then I'm going to be bump, 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 bump. That doesn't make any sense to me. You can't run a city that way.
Thanks, John.
And I think that the capital is part of what's making this not fit.
We're going to have Patricia respond to that for you. There's grant funding type stuff and going in there.
Thank you, sorry. Tim Tumulty, Cocoa Beach. I think we have a motion on the table at this point about moving the parking lot, parking garage to the right, or did I miss the vote on that?
No, it was just the marina. It was just moving the marina out.
Oh, wasn't the parking garage?
No.
Sure it was.
Thought it was a parking garage too.
Okay, yeah, that's right, yeah, it was both.
So we've talked so long and gotten the weeds, talked about 10 different things.
Yeah, we got distracted.
You know, we need to, and I've talked about this in the past, about having a meeting to train all the commissioners and all the other boards on Robert's rules, so you can run the meetings smoothly and stay organized. Otherwise, it just goes off in the weeds. That's all I gotta say.
Thanks, Tim. The reason why I did want public comment was because of the parking garage questions, but I want Patricia to answer him for his question there.
So one of the things that show the fiscal year '25 budget to be so much significantly larger for the capital is for the muck capping project. It's budgeted at $10 million in expenses. It's also fully grant funded. So if that project goes forward, it has offsetting revenues. So you'll see that on the revenue side, you see it on the expenditure side. If we don't go forward, they both fall off. So it doesn't really show that full impact of the capital costs that will come out by, or be covered by taxpayers' dollars, as that one is fully grant funded.
And that doesn't affect the reserve number for that
No.
year because they're fully offset.
Correct. And that's kind of the point of also, when you've got the grant funding, you've got the revenue coming in, you've got the expenditures going out. Without both of them, they're both gone. You know, if you lose the grant funding, then we usually don't move forward with the project. Same with the talking about using debt service. The thing about that is it moves that cost to the users over the upcoming years instead of putting that burden fully on this year's taxpayer. So there's a lot of, actually, there's a lot of advantages to using debt financing for such large, major projects such as this. It isn't because the commission is being, not managing the money, it's actually just the opposite. And so by moving it out over a 20-year period, it's next year's taxpayer and the taxpayer is the year after. And so as that facility is being used, it's being paid for. Those projects they're not in the budget at this point in and of itself. So at any point, the commission can give direction, even after the budget is adopted. So even if the commission says we want to adopt this with those projects in and debt financing in, and we get into the new fiscal year and they say, nope, we don't want to go forward, that's okay. Then we just do a budget amendment. We take the revenue, the debt proceeds out, and we take the cost out, and we amend the budget. So it's not, even at that point, it's not a completely, we're done.
But we just gave direction to take out the four.
That's fine.
I can. And defer it a year, so you can, on your 10-year plan, you can move it out a year. See how that affects the revenue.
For which one?
For the marina, 445,000, and the 7.8 for the parking garage.
Got it.
Well,
Did we actually?
yeah, to Mr. Tumulty's point, I don't think we voted on that, have we?
Yeah, that's not even in the,
We're
this
in
is just
public comment on
this was
a
just
motion.
a
We're not talking
recommendation.
about this yet. Go back 2 slides. The motion
still
for
have a vote. We've
consensus
got
was
closed,
to
right?
move the 445
We
and
need
the
to vote on that. We need to vote
7.8
on that.
out at least a year.
But this isn't even in the budget, this is a recommendation.
Yeah, but
Well,
it plays into the number.
Okay, all right.
it is in there at this
Okay.
moment.
All right, let's get this moving. All right, anybody have any more comments about this specifically? Just this specifically for this vote? All right, come on. We didn't vote for this. No, we didn't.
So Orson Tarver, 178 June Drive. So if you do move the parking garage out, I think what you could do is have the parking staff start to track the utilization. They're driving around, they could start to see the utilization of the current structure and parking in the area. And then when you come back in a year, reconsidering the garage, then you should have a pretty good idea on, if it's needed or capacity issues. So the Maria study, I mean, well, I understand what you're saying, Mr. Mayers. I mean, the feasibility study will determine if that money is ever spent. So why not just keep it in? The feasibility study comes out very promising, then everything's all set up and ready to go. And like you said, if the feasibility study doesn't come back good, then you simply don't spend the money. But as far as feasibility, I do have one suggestion. I have done a little research. The city of Titusville has a municipal marina. It's run by a professional management company. I looked at professional management company. They seem to have extensive
F3.
background. What's that?
F3.
Yeah. I don't know if that's an opportunity to work with them, because again, city staff can it's all public record. It's a city municipal arena. The city staff should be able to pull a lot of numbers for you guys and start to give you an idea of the financial impact. And maybe the F3 folks, I hope they haven't already been here, but maybe there's an opportunity for them to talk to you guys as well. So just sharing some thoughts. And then I want to give shout out to Wayne, the only city manager I've ever had willing to talk to me on a Sunday. He knows if he calls, it's going to be a long conversation, not 30 seconds. So appreciate what Wayne is doing. And then Wes gets back to me pretty darn quickly when there's issues, I think sometimes within minutes. So it's really nice to see how well things are going. So a little off topic, but thanks for your time.
Appreciate it.
There was somebody else back there.
It wasn't about this, though. All right, so we need to vote on this. So vote on removing the marina feasibility study and the parking garage.
Defer at least.
Defer it. Yeah, defer it. Honestly, I wouldn't mind deferring the fire station as well. I hate to say it, but I'd like to keep the money in the reserves more than, but we'll vote on these, we got this for the vote. So, all in favor of deferring the marina and the parking garage?
Aye.
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 Okay. And the reason why I went for that, 4-1, in favor of deferring it.
Got that.
The reason why I voted to defer the marina study is because there's a lot of people that just don't understand the whole thing about it, and rather than confuse everybody, and I decided to defer it to wait till after this feasibility study comes back, so.
I just had a question.
Yes.
For Wayne, actually. That doesn't stop you from moving forward and, like we agreed to in the last meeting, to research the feasibility of the parking garage and the financials of it and the partnership, right? We can still move forward with that.
Yes, we can, yeah.
I think you absolutely should, Why not see if it's feasible? It's not gonna cost us a penny. So go ahead and do what you gotta do, because, why not?
It's all ready to go anyway.
Yeah.
So Carolyn, we can do that in-house.
You guys can do it, right?
Yeah.
So before you go into this slide, Patricia, Mayor?
Yeah.
Before you go into this slide, Patricia, are these things, these options and recommendations that are all reductions, are they all baked into trying to meet the current millage rate that we have proposed?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
they would have to happen to meet the proposed money that's coming in
For this one,
for the millage rate. Okay.
for this one. And this, everything is based on current
All
millage.
right, so go back to that slide. Okay, so based on the fact that we deferred the potential debt for the marina and the parking garage, does that change any of these numbers?
No, because it'll just reduce the revenue, reduce the expenditure. The effect on reserves is nothing.
Okay, so taking this from the top down, I'm good with, it seems like we do tennis court improvements every other year. Resurfacing, new lighting, new building, it just seems to never end, and it's always expensive. And we're not getting we got a company that's running the place. It's a good amenity for the residents and the local community. But if we can defer it till 2026 without, tearing up the place, I'm good with that. The LED board sign replacement, that's the one.
So it's not pulling the project, it's just that recent information brought the quote down a little bit lower than what was brought to you last meeting. It was 100,000, but recent quotes are closer to the 75, so we can reduce that. The same with the accounting software we put in for 800 initially. We've been reaching out to governmental financial accounting software companies, and we think we can get it much closer to 500, hopefully less. But we think we can reduce that.
So what you're saying is the expense cost adjustment for the sign replacement is basically already realized that that's going to be reduced by 25,000.
But yeah, I've made that adjustment in the kind of looking at the budget and changing that. I've actually gone in and changed that
All right,
capital projected cost.
And then there's 300,000 that you believe would be a reduction in that accounting software replacement upgrade.
Yes.
Okay.
The 280 deferring the fire capital annual allocation. This is what Commissioner Hutcherson brought to our attention, where we were budgeting $1 million truck replacement over a period of, I think, 4 or 5 years. That has been removed from the 25 budget because that purchase is not going to happen in 25.
Okay.
The capital expenditure is going to happen, it's just a time phasing. It's
Right,
putting it in the year we're going to expend it.
Okay. So, and then the last one.
It's just asking each of the departments to look at their operating budgets again and see if they can do some cuts there.
Tighten their belt. So, besides the 32,000 all the rest of them are basically givens that are gonna happen.
Yes.
Okay, I'm good with that.
So some other things that you need to consider as we go through this budget process, and these are not reflected in anything that you've seen so far, is labor negotiations with the police and fire unions is currently underway. I don't have any idea of how that's going to go.
What is the citywide wedge, labor wedge that's built into this budget?
Citywide,
Zero?
we've done a
And-
4%
Okay.
COLA with 2% at the start of the fiscal year and 2% 6 months after.
Okay, so this is growth beyond that 4%. The budget has a provision for that 4%.
Potentially.
Right.
Is that a correct statement?
That is correct. Potentially could have additional costs to personnel as a result of the labor negotiations.
So let's say the labor negotiations say that basically to keep our people working, police, fire, whoever, that we're gonna have to agree to a 10% increase to make them competitive across the county based on all the benefits and whatever. So if that's what it comes down to, and we only plan 4%, so then, and we already passed the budget, we already passed the millage rate. So then we gotta make cuts
cuts.
to cover that 6%.
That is correct.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
So that's a threat to us.
Absolutely. So as a benchmark, I recall in one of the emails, the 4% was 800K. Is that an accurate statement? 4% citywide was 800K, to give you a benchmark of what it would be, what the challenge would be.
Right.
Over and above that. So just food for thought.
So it'd be another 1.2 million.
Right. Which I think is
Depending.
Right.
When we started, so big picture, what we're talking about tonight is millage rate, right? And what we're seeing in the budget is effectively from the department saying, if I were to give you my ideal budget so that I could optimize operations and do the best job I believe I can do in the most responsible way. This is not saying if I really had to tighten the belt. They were trying to give us the most accurate look at an optimized performance, right?
I think it's kind of the middle ground there.
I thought I understood it
With operating,
was.
they tried, this year, I think especially, they've tried really hard to give you what they think their true costs are going to be, which is why when I talked about asking them to reduce their operating, it's such a small number. I don't know that they're going to be able to optimally be able to provide the services if they do much of a cut, because they've actually, there is not a significant increase in the operating budgets. If you look at the 24 and you compare that to 2025 proposed.
Just for hysterical purposes, going through budget cycles in the past, and Patricia was here, we've had city managers that saw the writing on the wall, that we weren't gonna overly raise taxes or whatever, and they put all the departments into a 10% reduction challenge. And what Patricia's saying is challenging them to a 2 to 3% reduction is realistic. A 10% reduction is probably not realistic.
She's
And
almost
then
saying
you
it's
just
not realistic.
defer stuff, and you end up with a bow wave, and then you gotta pay me now or pay me later type of situation.
Yeah, and I definitely can appreciate that, but I think what I came out of last meeting from was that the budget numbers that this is based on, the discussion this is based on, is give me the best look at what you should have were we in an ideal financial state. This is not, hey, go tighten the belt. Now, where you're saying 2 to 3% would be coming back from, show me what you really believe you need to operate optimally. This is not us coming to our department head saying, hey, give me your bare bones minimum to survive next year. Like, they're giving us this look because it allows us to have the context we need from a millage discussion perspective. It's not because they're saying, hey, you give me this or I'm broke.
And really, where you're going to see those cuts, capital. They've already really cut the operating. They've put a lot of thought into it this year. And so in the past, I think there's been a lot more, well, I think I need 5,000, so I'm going to put in 6,000, so when I'm asked to cut, I've got something to cut. They didn't do that this year.
Yeah, no, and I know they have sharpened the pencil and have exquisite detail in what they're putting in front of us. I just wanted to make sure what we asked them for and what they gave us.
Yeah, when I ask them to cut, it's probably not going to be in operating, it's probably going to be in their capital. And they're going to be pushing it out to future years. It doesn't go away, they're just going to push it out.
And realistically, what you're saying is that only accounts to $32,120, so.
Because your operating budget is not that large total for the general fund.
That's.
Personnel.
I don't mean to say to the public that $32,000 is negligible, but across the departments, that is pretty negligible.
I mean,
Keep in mind,
our
operating
highest
costs are
cuts
year
are,
over year.
personnel is our highest, pretty much, so.
So back to.
Most of that increase that you see in this is, you're going to see it in your maintenance and your utilities, and we cannot control that. COCO's increasing the water by 5%. FPL is, I think, around 7%. And I think the garbage was, I forgot now, but we'll be getting we should be getting the final number for the increase for the garbage shortly. Other factors is the final 2024 expenditures and revenues are not known yet. We only have estimates. If we come in over budget on the revenues, that's going to improve our funds forward or our ending reserve balance. And if we come in under on our expenditures, that will also improve the ending reserve balance and our funds forward. So under budget and expenditures over on revenues will help the problem as we move forward. We just don't know what that is yet. We also do not know the final cost increase for the healthcare, although preliminary estimate is around 3.5%. Workers' comp, we don't know what that's going to be, and we may have some adjustments to the property liability insurance costs.
So these issues and these recommendations and considerations are all based on if we keep the millage rate the same.
Correct. Everything that we're looking at is looking at a millage rate that's the same as this year.
Okay.
I'm okay with her recommendations. I mean, I'm okay with all that.
The recommendations are already built into that budget, balanced at the current
When you're
level.
looking at these numbers here, those recommendations have already been included,
So-
with the exception of the 32,000.
So
I haven't
let's
asked that yet.
Let's just clear the air. The current millage rate, if we move forward to this year, is going to be a tax increase.
No, it
That
is.
is, it's always considered a tax increase
Right,
unless
right.
we go with rollback.
So have you come up with a percentage on that yet?
Have I calculated the amount that we'd have to reduce the budget if we went with rollback?
No. I'm saying it's a math question, okay? Based on the projected ad valorem tax income at that millage rate, what's the percentage increase from last year?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I didn't calculate that. Because we only have
8%.
preliminary numbers, and that'll change.
8%. It's a tax growth based on the same rate.
Okay,
between last
on
year.
what slide is that? It doesn't have a number.
It's still a tax increase whether or not we raise the millage rate, because property taxes go up.
Slide,
Is 8%.
does that say that it's a, is that, you're saying you haven't calculated that, that's maybe not?
That would represent an 8% increase in revenue. I don't know what if you're asking me what the percentage increase is for the tax increase, I don't know that it's exactly 8%. I look at that, I look at the trim, I follow the trim.
Right. All I'm saying is, just clear the air. What's the increase overall in the ad valorem taxes that are coming into the city, You know, everybody's different based on their exemptions and stuff, or non-exemptions. But the overall increase is to the city budget from ad valorem taxes is, for that chart,
Would be 8% revenue.
Okay.
But that doesn't necessarily mean it's an 8% tax increase, because I have to look at the trim numbers.
Okay, but when we go for the final on this in the commission, it's gonna say, you voted for this millage rate, it's a tax increase of X%.
When I do the advertisement prior to the second public hearing, prior to September 19th, it will list all of the final numbers that are being presented in the final budget, and it will include what the tax increase is,
And by percentage,
by percentage and by amount.
by amount. And we're, as of this chart, it's somewhere in the 8% range. Okay.
Yeah.
So just for anybody that might be listening, so the city has lots of expenses. I mean, personnel is the biggest expense. All 8% of that isn't, you know, we just heard it, 4% of it's going toward salaries. Over the past year, it's very likely that their expenditures to live on have gone up more than 4%. Materials that the city uses and everything else, and all their contracts and everything, the product gone up more than 4%. But anyway, 8% is not like a way inflated number based on the current inflationary cycle that we're in. So I would say that that's reasonable.
Can I ask you a question, Patricia? How would your recommendations change and how would our reserves change if you were to raise, like say, make it 6.2?
So for every quarter increase to the millage, it represents about $800,000 in additional ad valorem tax revenue.
Okay, so every quarter, okay.
Increase in millage is about $800,000.
How would so that's, let's say, 6.2.
We're at
That's like 1.5 now.
6.1644. So that's approximately 6.4144. Is it by 800,000?
800,000?
Roughly.
So, how would your recommendations change? Like, would it go more towards reserves, or should we put it, if we had the extra 800, or, I mean, even exploring a little bit more, like 6.23 or something, or 2.5, would the recommendations change, like this list change, or would we put it towards reserves?
I wouldn't, other than, you know, the departments reducing their operating budgets, I wouldn't change anything on this list necessarily. On deferring the tennis courts, I talked to project manager Scott Maxim. He said USTA is still willing to do the grant funding in fiscal year 26, and he's going to look for other options, other potential grant. He has no guarantee that he's going to find grants, but he's going to look for other grants to help defer some of that cost or cover some of that cost to us. But I think that is a project that's not going to go away. I think those other courts are going to have to be redone, and I think we're going to have to put the money into fixing those lights and the stormwater issues out there. So I think that's not a project that will completely go away. I think it's just going to be one that you defer. The other three, they don't need to be, those really don't need to be in there for the fiscal year 25. So I wouldn't change that. You know, some of the things that I would suggest that you could use with additional funding is, I've heard comments about the need for additional road improvements or sidewalk improvements. We do have some funds in the current capital, but it's like Blakely, and there's a small amount for projects, but I'm not sure if that's enough to meet the needs of the city, but to counter that is, I'm not sure if you have staffing time to do more than you've already got in there.
Would it help our reserve situation?
Yeah.
Would the extra possibly, would you recommend that going straight to reserves? Is that how it works?
The commission can make that decision. They could make the decision to go with a higher millage with the additional funding to go into reserves. You can stipulate that. And tonight, when you set the maximum millage, that doesn't mean that you have to use the maximum for your proposed, and you don't have to use the maximum for your final budget. It just is you can't go over that number.
What sort of a millage rate are you looking at to put the reserves where we need to be?
If we make the cuts, if we make the cuts and the changes, you will be just slightly, 0.6, yeah, just slightly under what you would need for your minimum reserve requirement. We would do enough cuts either in capital or, I mean, somewhere to make up that difference. The problem is that even with those cuts, you're just at the minimum requirement.
What if we push back on that 5 million for the fire department, put it back to the next year?
It's not going to change this number because I'll take the revenue out and I'll take the expenditure out, and the reserve number won't change.
Okay.
We can't spend that money elsewhere because it's covered by debt, so the revenue coming in. So it's not like we can defer that and that 5 million's freed up to spend elsewhere.
Okay.
Because it's paid for by debt.
All right.
Would you have
I
to
thought
make
that
all
was a
those
cash. I
cuts?
thought that was a cash thing.
Sorry?
Would you have to make all those cuts if we were to fund the reserve with an increase in millage?
No, because at this point, we're pretty close to having a balanced budget, pretty close. So we could cut enough to get it balanced without using anything additional to balance the budget. So you could increase it and say it's all to go into the reserve balance. And we could still balance based on what we're looking at right now.
And you're confident that if we did keep the millage rate the same, that you would be able to meet our requirements for,
It's just cutting
we
capital.
have to make it work, basically.
Yeah,
So.
we just defer capital.
Okay.
Well, you know, the things that I can't control is, I don't know these things.
All right.
I attached copies of this, just so you can see some of the other funds. None of these funds use, well, the CRA uses the TIF fund, so it is impacted by the ad valorem. But the rest of these are not, none of the funding comes from ad valorem taxes. This is special revenue fund. This is the building permits and inspections. This is your capital improvement projects fund. So this is your city hall construction and your bicentennial park. This is the utility system fund. This is a user fee funded fund, and the stormwater fund. This, just to make a note, does reflect the increase in rates that will be brought to you on Thursday's meeting. So this will adjust based on how that meeting goes.
All right, thank you, Patricia.
Yep.
And let's take
Can I
some.
ask another question?
Yeah, you may.
What, if we keep everything the same that we're looking at now, how does the projection of our reserves next year look like?
How does it look for next year?
Yeah,
So,
I know we've in the past, we've extrapolated out to see what it looks like this year to next year. Are we gonna be worse off with the reserves, or
If
You're gonna be
you
in the same
ended the
situation.
year exactly as projected, then you would end the year with the 8.7 million that you're required for your minimum reserve balance. That becomes your funds forward. And so then it's just a matter of how you budget for your revenues and how you budget for your expenditures in the future years. So as long as you're balancing your budget, but keep in mind, the city commission has adopted the ordinance that unassigned balance will go up by 1% next year, so your reserve requirement will go up. In addition, as your operating personnel and debt service costs go up, so does the reserve requirement. So your reserves next year will be, by necessity, will have to be higher.
And with the uncertainty of labor negotiations, that could affect our balanced budget, like
Yes.
these other things.
Yeah, so anything that gets negotiated that is greater than the 4% that is in this will require capital to be reduced.
Okay. So we'd have to cut more then,
Yes.
than what we're seeing here.
Yes, depending on how those negotiations go.
Would you recommend having some cushion for that? And like
Pushing
if we,
for,
like, say, we up the millage rate to allow cushion for that, would you recommend something
to
like
up, to up the millage to cover the cost of
that? The bill,
personnel costs in police and fire? I don't have a recommendation.
okay.
I mean, you could look at it that way. You could look at it for funding the capital outlay. You could look at it as building a stronger reserve balance. I don't really have a recommendation for you. I think that's a decision of the commission. But I will say that, you know, if we can't come to an agreement with at the negotiation table, it could have an effect and could reduce the capital.
So it's a known unknown.
We have a $19 million capital budget. It's going to come out of that, right? As we move things out, that's going to cover that pressure.
But of that 19 million, you know,
So that's
we've already identified that we're going to move out, right, the 5 million.
The 12 million.
Yeah,
It's going to have to come out of the 12 million. So it's a sizable network to pull from. That's why I said 4% is represents 800K-ish citywide.
Thank you, Patricia.
yep.
Let's take some public comment. Go ahead, Tim. We'll go Tim first.
Tim Tumulty, Cocoa Beach. Patricia, I have a question on the operating budget. Is our operations 13 million? Is that correct? And you have this number of 32,000? Is that 2 to 3% of 13 million? Because that's 320,000. It's not 32,000. If you're using the operating budget of 13 million, 2 to 3% is going to be over 300,000. So that's a difference there, so that's another reduction.
Good catch.
Are we going to, I mean, you guys are going to kind of set a millage rate going forward. I gave you all a sheet of paper with your properties, market value, commissioner's market value, and yours is on there too. I put mine on there as well. It's all public record. You could look at Brevard County property appraisers and get this information. That's where I pulled it. It's not some private thing that you can't look at. Our millage was in 2012 was 4.9. This year it's 6.1. That's an increase over the last 11 years of approximately 1.1, 1.2, which is a 0.1 change in millage roughly every year. And that equated to a difference for all of us, about the average is somewhere around $300 increase from 2012 property taxes to last year's property taxes. So in 2012, I paid X amount. This year, I'm paying roughly $300 more than I did 12 years ago. And that's based on an increase in millage of 1.1, approximately 1.1, which turns out to be less than 1% increase in taxes per year. So you got to think about that. One more thing I want to talk about while I'm up here, and it has to do with the golf course. There's a lot of talk about the golf course and how it's losing money. Monetarily, financially, you know, right at the base here in the golf course, it's losing money. But in overall, as an amenity, it's an amenity to the community. If the golf course wasn't here, the property values in the community and all of Cocoa Beach would probably be much lower. As a matter of fact, I looked it up, it's somewhere around 9%. So if we reduce the property values in Cocoa Beach by 9%, that's a decrease in ad valorem tax of $1.6 million. So I just want to bring that to your attention before you all go, hey, we got to do something, you know, get rid of the golf course and all that.
We'll never do that.
Maybe making the golf course more efficient might be a better way to handle it.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, John.
John Los, 444 Dempsey Drive, Cocoa Beach. Tonight's purpose is to set the max millage rate, which speaks to the ad valorem taxes. And if the ad valorem tax revenue is not the biggest revenue stream the city has, it's got to be in the top two if it's not number one. I don't know if it's number one, but so we're talking about taxes to residents, and not just residents, but property owners. So that's our job tonight, and we have to do our job. But I hope behind the scenes, there's an equal amount of diligence that's being put into looking at user fees. So not only are we going to pass the burden of increased operating, maintenance, and capital costs on to not only residents, but it's not just residents, it's property owners. It's everybody who's not even in this room. We all share the burden of increased costs. But behind the scenes, we need to be looking at user fees to make sure that the amenities, stormwater, everything that's supported by user fees, make sure we're maximizing that revenue too. In the last several years, I attended a couple meetings that were here in the commission room. The two that come to my mind was one on golf course fees, and the study was presented by a lady that said we're not maximizing our fees during the peak time of the year. So that's a user fee review. We weren't as efficient as we should be. I saw another one on stormwater, how the stormwater was running a deficit because we hadn't adjusted our rates for several years. And I think that's been corrected too. But my point is, as we look at the ad valorem, we should make sure that we're maximizing user fees too. It seems like it's fair to spread the wealth across everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Lou Beckett.
All right, so y'all are going to set a maximum millage rate based on what's presented in a budget. And first of all, I want to thank you all for what you do for the city. But again, I'm going to convey my dissatisfaction with the continued failure of this city's fiducial responsibilities to its residents and businesses. There are some problems. It's been just about an hour because I couldn't find this information until this afternoon, looking at what was posted online. And there were some problems in page 30, which represents the police budget. Those problems include furniture and equipment on a line item for $242,000. Don't we think that's a little excessive? $89,000 for new weapons, budgeted at $1,500 apiece. When I went online without a quantity discount and found that what was being asked for only cost $1,000, actually $960 apiece. $10,000 in subscriptions. What are we paying $10,000 for magazines? I don't know what support services is. But I would assume that if it had anything to do with personnel, that that would have been put with the personnel services. In addition to these issues, there's an irresponsible policy of allowing these police officers to take their vehicles, cruisers, home at a cost, if you do, 22 miles a day, because the two closest cities for them to go to, aside from Cape Canaveral, are 11 miles away, at 65 cents a mile. That exceeds $250,000 per year cost to the city. That's not reflected in any budget anywhere, not in the police budget, not in the fleet budget. And if you were to keep those vehicles in the city and assign them to officers when they come on duty, you could have saved at $72,000 each for each unnecessary vehicles. That's 28 vehicles, that, given my information that there's 43 officers that have 43 cars. That would be 28 cars at $72,000 apiece, so that's $2,088,000 that could have been saved and put in their pay, in their pockets as additional pay. That 10% you're talking about, that would have been, in a year's time, that would have been a 40% increase in their pay. None of this money is accounted for. May I continue?
How much longer do you got?
Not long, because some of it we've already discussed.
As long as it's quick.
Okay, why are we spending $5 million again on another fire station? We've got a brand new one. On page 40, Fleet Services, $1.5 million for furniture and equipment. I don't know where $1.5 million worth of furniture goes, or equipment goes, in the facilities we have for Fleet Services, whereas $400,000 on maintenance over and above the payroll cost for Fleet Services. I mean, that's $400,000 we're spending to maintain vehicles. That doesn't include the payroll for the people doing the work on them. $1 million on vehicles and machinery. What are we buying that's $1 million for fleet maintenance? I don't understand this. I've already talked about the guns. That doesn't make any sense. And on top of that, wasn't it just a few years ago that we bought 2 guns for every
We
officer?
already
that
went
was
through the
in?
guns, sir. Let's just wrap it up.
All right, well, I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And your concerns are valid, and if anybody, I can't answer these questions, so if anybody here wants to engage, you're welcome to. If not, we'll keep going. All right, let me go through this next one. Klaus. Yeah, I figured you probably wanted to, I saw you put your hand back up, so.
KB Finke, 190 Seminole Lane. Clearly, the budget presented today, the starting point was keeping the millage rate. And kudos to you to making that happen. What I'm concerned about is there's so many unknowns, and I've done many budgets in my life. You're going down a year where you have unknowns that will blow your budget out of the water, so you're knowing right now of going towards making more cuts somewhere else. Some of the costs you can't control. Usually in a budget, you probably can't control all but 15 or 20% of the rest, because the rest is fixed costs. Ain't gonna go away. So I would urge you to at least go a quarter point higher, get the 800,000. If you don't need them in the year, if the miracle happens and you don't need them, put them into the funds where they could help you get something out of it. But keep, in my opinion, go a little higher, get that breathing room into your budget, so when something happens, you're not going to go, oh, well, we ain't going to get another car for the police, or we're going to ask somebody else to not do anything or work for, well, never mind. You know what I'm trying to say.
Thank you. Marge Snyder, I don't know if she's still here. I think she already had a question. Orson, did you want anything else to say, or you're good? Okay. And Rick, are you, okay. Yeah.
Well, you see what I wrote the topic. Is it okay to speak to that or not?
I can't.
about the boat ramp?
Oh, the boat ramp,
Let me start on that for you.
is that in the budget or not?
No, let me start on that for you.
You always say that?
No, you can stay there.
Okay. I don't want to be off topic, it's just a
So,
time.
city manager, the boat ramp on Holiday Lane is in the budget for 2026, and it's at $75,000. Is there any potential for maybe getting some, I would think because that is a public boat ramp, that it would be eligible for fine money. Do you think there's any potential to flag that for bringing it into next year's budget?
Definitely. Whether it will qualify for fine funding, you'd never know until you apply. There was an issue in the past by fine, whether that was actually a public.
Wasn't the issue in the past, so it'd require commercial usage if you took the fine money?
Yes.
I don't think we want that, though, because this doesn't have the capacity or anything. That's the only thing, sorry to jump in.
So the bottom line is,
Move it up, I'll take it.
We want to accelerate it. We don't want to
I'm just
subsidize
saying,
it.
can you, just for me, before we get to the final budget, can you work with Patricia and see if there's a way to squeeze that $75,000 into next fiscal year?
I can do anything for you.
Well, you can present it in the final budget, and we don't need to vote on it. Does that satisfy you, Orson?
Yeah, well, I mean, I appreciate it. It's for the residents too, you saw the petitions and everything, and it's something that we've been really waiting on, and I think it's a good investment in the community, so.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, let's keep moving. Thank you.
That'd be a great
You're
thing.
good.
And then I just want to say, if Wes needs more guns, let's get him some more guns, and however much they cost. Do you need $2,000 guns? We can get some of those. Machine guns? All right, well, if he needs some, just make sure it's in the budget, all right?
Well, why don't we just have donations from the people in the city?
Rick,
Why would you ever give up guns?
let's keep moving. Rick?
Rick Anderson, 1800 Minuteman Causeway, and a lot of the concerns I came in with have been answered, which is a good thing, but one of the line items that does concern me a little bit, and going along with what my friend John said, the sprinkler system on the golf course. Last year, we were presented with this dire scene that we had to immediately replace the sprinkler system because it was falling apart. So we put $800,000 in there, and now that didn't get spent, and now there's another $800,000 request in there this year, and I'm assuming there's going to be another $800,000 in there next year. So this is $2.4 million for sprinklers on the golf course. Again, if user fees have got to somehow pay for it. And if they can't, then we really need to examine that. And I'm really questioning why the initial $800,000 wasn't spent if it was that much of an emergency. As far as setting the millage rate a little bit higher, I'd also like to remind you all that you did pass what amounted to a resolution, but you did pass a law resolution that you were going to establish a fund, a rainy day fund, or a savings account fund toward future capital investments. And I don't see any, in my opinion, if that fund was established, there should be a fund with a zero balance in it showing on the budget documents. And then if you choose to fund it, you choose to fund it. But if you make a resolution like that, I think that maybe an effort should be made to fund that. And I don't see how that's all going to be done unless the millage is bumped up a little bit.
Thank you, Rick. Go ahead, Patricia.
So regarding the sprinkler system, your sprinkler system is currently not functioning. Hasn't been for over a year. I think Laird, the director, is here. Yeah. So we budgeted to do the replacement of the sprinkler system, 9 holes per year over a 3-year period. Each of those 9 holes will take about $800,000 to replace the entire sprinkler system. By the time we got through the process, we were at a point where getting the contractor to come in, where they were at their peak season. So one, the cost was much more expensive. Two, the availability was almost non-existent. So if we were to wait until the fall, we would get a better price and we would have a choice of vendors because they're now in their off-season and more available to perform the work. So what you're seeing in the budget is taking this year's 800 and using it and doing a full 18 holes in the upcoming fall. But it's still using the same funds. We didn't spend them because we had problems getting the vendor, and two, because we couldn't get the cost. If we waited and did both the 24 and the 25 sections all at once, we got a better pricing and we have more options with vendors. So it's just trying to work smarter to achieve the same results.
Thank you, Patricia.
Let me say a comment to that.
Janice, Scott.
Somebody's phone is left behind.
I say a comment to that. Just from my perspective, that's exactly right. It fell in our favor. It wasn't planned that we were supposed to do 800,000 last year. It fell out. We can bundle it this year. But that was why I was hesitant on the marina and I guess it was just the marina, because I think we've got a lot of scope. That and the skate park is another one that we're not executing on necessarily to plan. So I don't want to put another, I guess it's the second fire station and
Yeah,
the
if
marina.
it's-
It's a lot of projects we have to execute rather than just
You've got
reserving
to have
money.
the number
for it.
of people to do it.
Yeah,
you-
and I'm not pointing fingers,
It
I'm
may
just
not be a
saying, let's not
financial
put
limit,
another
maybe
project on
personnel.
top of two that are already delinquent.
Yeah.
That's my point on that. But thank you for bringing that up. I feel like the user fee thing, it's the same thing. We kind of arbitrarily set those last year. We had this hit list.
Yeah.
And nothing's come out of it. Anyways.
Thank you. Janice?
Okay, so Janice Scott, Cocoa Beach. I'm really glad that one of the avid golfers brought up the, please don't close the golf course because it raises all our property values. So just for the record and the history, when that golf course increased in size and they built this Taj Mahal here, my father was an avid golfer. He could never get me to come out here and play golf. Those guys liked it the way it was. They didn't want the golf course increased. Oh, it was going to bring business to the hotels. They were going to have all kinds of junkets and so forth. So I think what I'd like to explain to the golfers, what the rub is I'm an avid gardener and I pay for reclaimed water. I want to know how many golfers do not subscribe to reclaimed water, which has gone up over the years from $5 to now $15. And I hope on Thursday, when it's on the agenda, that you all will not increase that fee because it's unfair to us who like the reclaimed water. And I'd like the golfers, though, who don't pay for reclaimed water, to see how it feels to subsidize someone else's recreation. That's what the rub is here. Is I don't play golf, and I really do resent having to subsidize everybody who goes out there and hits a ball. Then the wind blows through. It takes all those nets down from the driving range. So who gets to pay to put them back, replace them all? It's not the golfers. It's the rest of us who don't play golf. We subsidize that, and that's what the rub is. And I wish you all would come up with some really creative ideas about how to stop it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. No, wait, Tim, he's been waiting. Okay. Thank
Got to
you.
leave it until.
I do play for guys together for reclaimed water, so you can put me on that side of the ledger.
Scott
All right, I'll allow it.
2100 North Atlantic Avenue. I've been coming to budget meetings since I first moved here in 2014 full-time. And at least for the last 3 years, several of the items, well, for the 14 years, and to Tim's earlier point, the budget's only gone up like 1% a year. That's because it's been rolled back every single year. Always at the end, everybody goes and let's line this item out, this item out, this item out. And believe me, it gets down to more than just $1,000 guns. It gets down to $35 permit fees. And that's why it was only 1%. But all those things keep getting rolled and rolled and rolled. I mean, she's been asking for software for at least 3 years. Always gets lined out. The police vehicles got lined out last year. They're back here this year. You're gonna go another year? Somebody has to pay it eventually. To run the city the way it's well-run by the people that know how to run it, give you a budget, and it's your responsibility to listen to them and give them what they need to run the city. Not micromanage them, but give them what they need, because they're producing the results that you want, right? And you did make a commitment to keep reserves, because it only takes one bad storm, and all those plans go down the drain. And you're still not reserved enough to recover from the 3 fiscal years it'll take you to get that money back. So keep that in mind too.
Thank you,
So
sir.
2 more meetings to go through. Stick to your guns and give them what they want and more.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Okay, Mayor, so the business at hand is to set the tentative millage rate and then to confirm the follow-on budget meeting dates.
Okay.
I asked Patricia something about the millage rate before we get into that.
Yeah.
Patricia, can I ask you a question? So you said that a quarter of a mil equals about 800,000.
Yes.
Okay. And I remember the last one of these you gave us in the last meeting, our reserve said for the general fund, the way it was set at right at that point in time was 3.4 million.
Yes.
And we needed about 6.7 to hit the 19%.
Yeah.
Right. So I was thinking of proposing to raise the millage rate 0.1, which would give us 3.2 million, right? 800 times 4.
320K.
So it's like from 6.16 to 6.26, right? So 0.1, that's, 800 times 4 is 3.2 million. And the reason being, I would say allocate all that to the reserve. That almost balances the difference from what you originally told us we had to what we need, the 19%. And just about, I think it's like a 3.3 difference. That way we can have a cushion, so we can deal with the uncertainties that you listed.
1% of 3.3.
On one's gonna be 300K, not 3.2 million.
A quarter is
2.5 would
800,000,
be about
right?
800.
So if you raise it a 0.1, right?
It'll be less.
It's less.
So 0.1 times, wait, 1/4, okay, so that's,
It's like 300 and something thousand.
About 350,000.
0.1 is 360,000?
Yeah.
How much?
Roughly, because we don't have final numbers and. But
320,000.
just roughly, you're looking at that.
How
So
much would it take to
0.25,
get the 3.2?
yeah, 0.25 increase is about 800,000,
3.2.
roughly.
Go 1.0, not 0.1, you'd go 7.16.
You need another
Get you
percentage.
A whole other,
You need a whole nother percent.
1.0, yes.
If you want,
you need like 7 point,
7.16 will get you an extra 3.2 million.
7.16.
But I thought you said 0.1, which is 320K.
So a quarter of a mil is, a quarter of a mil would be
0.25.
6.16 plus 0.25. That's what we're
I'm
talking
not
about,
good at
right?
public math, but
a quarter mil would be 0.25.
0.25, which would be 6.16 plus 0.25. I'm doing that right? Okay. Which would be 6.41, which would give us 800,000.
Roughly.
Okay. Okay, so, and then another 0.25,
Would be
Would be
roughly
6.6.
1.6 million.
which would give us 1.6 million. Okay. All right.
So
Well, I can't see, okay, I
How
can't
much-
see
how much
raising the
money are you
whole
asking?
point, but I want to propose raising it at least like 0.5 to give us 1.6 million, put just towards the reserves, to give us some relief on the reserves and spread it out to wherever it needs to go for the uncertainties.
And you
At
can
least we
set
can.
that as your max mill, and between now and the final, you can opt to go lower.
So technically, Patricia and Karen and our city attorney, is this the meeting that we set the maximum?
That is correct.
Okay, so that, it wasn't clear by the agenda, so I just want everybody to know.
It's the proposed millage,
Once we
which is the
set
same as the
tonight,
max.
It can't go up from there.
Correct. You can go down, you can't go up.
I'd like to make a motion to propose 6.6 mil, 6.66, or up half a mil.
number.
Go up half a mil and put that straight to the reserves.
You want to do 666?
Oh, let's just say we'll put a half a mil.
6.6644.
0.6644. I think we can only do 2 decimal points, right?
Well, welcome.
No, we go out 4.
Oh, you go out 4.
All right,
Okay.
I got a motion. Do I got a second?
So, welcome to my world, Carolyn. Motion dies for lack of a second.
All right, motion dies for lack of a second. Any other motions?
I move to approve the millage rate for carry forward from last year, 6.1644.
You're saying approve the max at that, not approve, because we're not approving the millage rate.
I'm sorry,
Right.
approve the ceiling, millage ceiling at 6.1644, which was last year's.
Second.
All right, I got a motion and a second. Any comment?
So it's a bit of a struggle, right? Because I think there's a lot of valid comments being made of, we're putting a ceiling on it, not voting on the millage, right? And so with uncertainty associated with the labor negotiations and things like that, we've got to be smart, right? We've got to provide ourselves some room. But at the same time, it's just like giving yourself 2 weeks to get a project done. It'll take you 2 weeks. If you up the millage, you are most likely going to come in at that number, right? Whatever you set your budget at. And so there's a balance there. Weighing in the fact that we've got a city who's facing significant inflation, right? So it's your material costs, it's going to be your cost of contracts, your capital, everything. And we've got city employees who are themselves facing the same inflation in their homes, right? So your pay rates have to adjust so that they can remain as an employee of the city, or they've got to go somewhere else. But at the same time, we've got folks on fixed income who are residents who are now going to have to pay the increase. We've got families who are moving in here, and I appreciate what Tim had put together. I think there's a couple items in there that could be adjusted. There's 2 folks that are paying 125% more than everybody else and 325% more than the average rate of increase. And it's going to be the people who came in to Cocoa Beach more recently, right? A lot of them are going to be the young families, and having young families coming into Cocoa Beach is a good thing, but their budget and costs are going to be higher. And so where they take it on the nose with a millage increase, you're not going to get the statistical increase across families and residents. You're going to have some people it's going to be harder for, some people it's going to be easier for. And so I'm just saying, I tend to agree with a lot of the discussion, and not all of it has been, congruent, that there's sides to this. And I'm open to the millage increase, but I think millage ceiling increase, but we've got to remember that if we increase it, unless we're careful, we're most likely to meet the increase. And it has impacts for the city, and it has impacts for the residents and business owners of the city.
Commissioner Jackson, my experience is that anytime that an increase in the millage rate has been, a maximum has been approved, I've said, I want to see, when they bring to the next budget meeting, I want to say, what are you going to do with that millage rate? And what are you going to do
At the current.
with the lower millage rate? and what are the deltas? And it basically, it all ended up being, we gotta have the higher millage rate. That was always what it was. So when you think about, and I don't know if his numbers were correct, and I'm not gonna look them up right now, but, you know, $1.5 million for furniture and equipment for the police station that's less than 5 years old doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, you must not have bought very good furniture. But I think, you know, everybody at home has to tighten their belts. So maybe if we pass this millage rate, that we're gonna come up with some numbers that are gonna meet it, and if we're wrong, and the labor negotiations come up with a number that's way higher than anybody would have expected, to be able to keep our police and our fire here in the city doing their jobs without a bunch of attrition and our city employees, then, yep, maybe we have to eat some reserves. And then next year, we're gonna have to raise taxes because we learned our lesson. So I wanna support the current millage rate, which is an 8% increase.
So also, last time, the same thing, the 6.1644 was the max millage rate. And they said, that same argument, well, that's just the max, we don't have to use it. But that's where we're at. So just something to consider on that as well. Does anybody want to comment that hasn't already commented on millage rate increase? Okay, let's make a vote. All in favor to keep the millage rate at the 6.1644? Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
What was the vote?
5-0, motion carries.
Okay. All right, so then I'd like to make a motion to confirm the budget meeting dates for September 4th at 6 o'clock and September 19th at 7 o'clock, both in 2024.
Say that again? Say that again? All right, what was that?
Just like what it says right here.
Oh.
Confirm the budget meeting dates and times for September 4th, 2024 at 6 p.m. and September 19th.
Oh, okay.
2024 at 7 p.m. You should bring your glasses to the
Yeah,
meeting.
I know, right?
Here, you want to try mine?
All right. All right.
You'll never get seasick wearing these.
Yeah, right.
Your eyes will get lazy. You'll have to start
I'm looking for a second.
Second on those dates, second on the budget dates.
Okay, I got a motion and a second for these dates. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes 5-0. All right, thank you guys for, we already had public comment. We're gonna adjourn.
Your house has got to be worth more than $200.
You want, here, go ahead, come on. We have one more public comment.
It's not on there.
The reason I come up here now is because I'm John Dillon, live on East
Sure.
Osceola.
Thank you, John. Go ahead.
At 6:06 PM tonight, I received an email from the city of Cocoa Beach. It says, new event special meeting. Meeting commission for Cocoa Beach. The date, July the 16th, 6 PM. Somebody sends these emails out. We didn't get Wayne, somebody to work on and find out why these emails come in late after the meeting has already started. That just makes no sense at all. Gonna get Wayne to work some on the software or whoever emails going out so everybody can get them, so let people know about it.
What email service do you have? What email?
Other usually I get it any time. I've never, only the city of Cocoa Beach, this one. It happens every once in a while.
We'll absolutely look into it.
Let's just make improvements for that.
I agree, we absolutely will look into it, that we need to give more notice, obviously. So thank you for that comment, appreciate it. Meeting adjourned.